Okay, so today I want to try something a little bit different. I was thinking I'm going to talk a little bit about politics, which I did a little bit before, but in this video I want to look at the German election, and specifically there's something called the Wahlomat, which is like election-o-mat. You know, like it's a kind of a quiz basically, where you can see which German parties you have overlaps with. The way that it works is there's this agency, it's the Federal Agency for Political Education in Germany, and despite the dystopian name where you think it's like a propaganda outlet, it actually does pretty good work, right? Relatively even-handed, of course not like, I mean, it's pretty broad in a way, but you can get a lot of very good information from it. They also publish books at a relatively cheap price, and they have a magazine which is more aimed at high school children, or like early university high school children, which has a lot of very good information as well. Like, so I would recommend that as well if you're interested and can speak German. Because that, I'm not sure if they do anything in English. But yeah, I used to read those when I was in high school, and even afterwards sometimes they give a really good overview over a specific topic. And additionally what they do is they make this kind of quiz where they basically get all the parties, and in Germany there is a fair amount. I think it actually says on the webpage, but I don't know, like 34 are running, I think, right now for the election in 3 weeks, the federal election in 3 weeks, and of those I think 33, only one did not reply to them asking them a bunch of questions. So basically the way it works and how I like it, why I like it maybe even a little bit more than like the political compass, is that it goes about specific policies that are discussed in the campaign or in like the general zeitgeist right now, and they get all the parties to answer their the way they would, maybe also give like an elaboration, although that's not as important for the quiz. And so you can see, if you answer these questions, what your overlap is with them. And I also find it as a really good way to like think about what kind of questions there are right now in the discussion. Of course, it's not all questions, not the most important questions, but might still be interesting. So yeah, maybe I'll also do the political compass sometime. I did that one many times in the last 15 years, or whenever it came out. Maybe it's not 15, maybe it's 10, but I do have actually somewhere my political changes can be seen, where I'm basically, I've always been like very what is it, this authoritarian, and is it libertarian? I don't know what the other part of the axis is, what they call it specifically, but I've always been very libertarian. But I used to be more right-wing, like you used to be more like basically an ANCAP, and over time I've like moved over, actually more libertarian now than I used to be when I called myself an anarchist sometimes, and much more left in terms of economics. And I just think that's because I've understood more about economics basically and how the world works, but your mileage may vary. Okay, so so the way that I want to do it is basically I'm going to open the app on my phone, and I'm going to probably put it in here. Maybe. I don't know yet how. I've not done this before. And then I look at the app, so we're looking down here, down there, where the subscribe button is, just a hint, and yeah, okay. And so now you can look at the screen, and basically it says Berlin, Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, and Bundestagswahl. Bundestagswahl is the federal election, because they basically do this this quiz for every election. Germany is a federal state, in some ways similar to the US, but also quite different actually. But basically there is 2 more elections. Well, there's like consecutive elections at the same time for Berlin and Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, which are states of Germany, and the federal election. But I'm interested in the federal election, so I'm going to start this. So you can see it. The election is on the 26th of September. Stato. Alright, so it's loading. Well, that's not starting so well yet. Okay. Okay, so it's actually 40 parties, you can see it here, and 39 of them answered. So let's go. Okay, first question. On all highways, there should be a general speed limit. Should there be a general? I should probably have read them before. Okay, so should there be a general speed limit on all highways? As you know, in Germany, you can on many highways drive as fast as you want. There is no speed limit at all. It's kind of famous for that. And there's a lot of discussions about this topic in particular, because on the one hand, like there's like ideas of freedom tied into it. Then also like, oh, Germany is this nation of car makers, right? Of making car, and like the highways, like these free highways with super speed is like helping as like kind of a an advertisement, I guess, and also like a way to test them, and it's actually a good investment, things like that. And then you can perhaps tell I'm not that convinced from that argument. And then of course, like on the other hand, people are saying, well, so one aspect is that a lot of people die because of the high speed. And then the argument that people will say, like, no, but there's actually a lot of safety precautions and it's not that big of a deal, not that many people die. Maybe in international comparison it's not even that bad. I actually don't know the numbers of that. And I guess the more pressing argument right now against having no speed limit, so for having some sort of speed limit, is that it would help with CO2. It would actually limit how much cars will emit, because a slower, more steady pace is better for the environment. That's basically the argument that like the Green Party and places like that do, and parties like that make. And then on the other hand, then people will say, well, it's actually very limited, it's not that important, like it's it would have helped a little bit, but almost not at all, and so we should really do other stuff. But then often, like, they won't specify the other stuff. There's a lot, so you can see there's a lot of discourse around that. For me personally also, almost all other countries, I think, I don't know which countries don't have speed limits, but all the European countries, as far as I know, do have speed limits, and they're usually like something like 120, maybe 130. It's the same in Japan, where I live. They also have a speed limit. And from my personal experience, even though I do like driving fast sometimes, I did like that, the experience of driving at a speed limited road is much nicer. And it's much less stressful. It feels much safer. You can just like relax a lot more. You know pretty clearly when you arrive. On a German road, you can probably imagine, like, not everyone will drive more or less the same speed, but if you have like a 120 kilometer per hour speed limit, almost everyone drives that. Any car can achieve that, right? So everything is sort of in the same flow. Sure, like there's some people that go faster or slower, but on German roads, there's like a lot of cars that will go 120, even though there's no speed limit. But then there's some that come like with 240, right? And that can be kind of like dangerous or annoying for both drivers, really, right? Because on the one hand, you're taking over someone. You know, maybe you're driving 140, and the other one is driving 120. In Germany, I think trucks are actually limited to 100, and suddenly, like, someone just, you know, they have like a Ferrari and go like 260, and they just like, either they have to slow down, or you're like really, should I speed up, should I get on the other side? It's very stressful. And the other way too, like if I used to drive sometimes also 220, and then suddenly like someone goes out to overtake someone, and you're like, you have to hit the brakes. It's just very stressful. I am generally in favor of a speed limit for, well, so the reasons that I said, like it's more safe. It's definitely better for the environment. That's a big one. I think like on average people actually arrive faster if there's no speed limit, because it like gives like a much more steady flow of the cars, and it is much nicer to drive. So I actually am for a speed limit, even though I do like driving fast sometimes, and that would be not an option that I have anymore then. So I'm just gonna agree. All right. This is gonna take a while if we're gonna do it this way, but you know, there's a lot of interesting points to be made. Okay. Germany should increase its defense budget. So that is also a pretty contentious issue. I mean, I guess all of these are contentious in some way. Like there's at least two, often multiple sides with different reasoning. The increase of a defense budget. I think like maybe the biggest aspect of it is that basically Germany has agreed, and I think all NATO, as Americans call it, signatories have agreed to a 2% of GDP defense budget, and Germany is far below that. Maybe I don't know, 1.4. I don't know. I didn't do any research on this. This is just like you can look this up yourself. But either way, so all of them have agreed to 2%. Germany has said that by 2024, 2025, I don't know, they are going to reach the 2%. Maybe later. I don't know. It's again something you can look up. You've probably heard like Trump talk about it, like in the sense that, oh, we're actually being screwed over by NATO, you know, they're not paying their fair share, which is a bit absurd in a bunch of ways, because NATO is just such a useful thing for the United States. It's basically a tool of their imperial power all throughout Europe and the world, and it's very cost effective. Then additionally, this is not about paying towards NATO, which everyone does already, by for what it actually needs to be done. It's about like how much their own militaries, how big their own militaries are. And of course, I mean, what ties into that again is then like, you know, maybe like the military industrial complex, you know, like the industries can sell more to Germany. Well, Germany has also its own military industrial complex, and then that might get more powerful. So there's like a lot of aspects to that. So okay, so that's the US, but it's not just Trump, right? Like all of the US presidents have basically been like, well, you should increase military spending. Germany, I think the UK is actually at 2%. A lot of other NATO countries are not. Some are. Germany isn't. Germany still has a very big army because it's just a very rich country. Big, not in the sense of like a lot of troops, but it's very wealthy. And also like almost all armies, there is always like, oh, this is a bad usage of money. There's like a lot of scandals around that. If Germany, so I looked this up a while ago, but I don't remember it. Like I think if Germany did actually have 2%, I think it would be the third biggest, the third wealthiest army in the world. It would just be like top dog there, which probably a bit threatening to the Russia, you know, because that's partly what NATO is about. It's to fight against, well, it was initially to fight against like the Soviet Union, to protect against the Soviet Union, you know, however you want to frame that. Obviously there are no ministries of war anymore, they're all ministries of defense now. But so that's one aspect, and I think that would be kind of maybe a problem with Russia, who knows. And also just generally, like I think maybe this has changed, but like in the past, I would say like in the 80s, like a lot of countries, even in Europe, did not necessarily want Germany to be that strong, powerful, and militaristic. And I think that might have something to do with our history. Okay, so that's like to give like some flavor of the idea. Then on the other hand, like obviously like more leftist parties, they're generally just completely against armies. or like any sort of spending for that kind of thing, because they in some ways rightly see that it's kind of a very right-wing organization. It's kind of can lead to like a sort of warmongering, like you can see that in the United States, of course, which is like incredibly militaristic, and so they don't really like that. So what do I think, really? I think for me, one aspect is I don't really like that Germany and Europe is so reliant on the United States. I think the United States are an important partner, but they shouldn't be the only partner for Europe. We should also see to have good relations with China and also Russia, even though both China and Russia, but also America, have a lot of human rights violations that we should try to work against. I'm not saying Europe is perfect in that way, but out of those four, I have to say I do think Europe is just better in terms of human rights and social rights than the other ones. You know, it's that way. And I think one part for Europe to continue to play a role on the geopolitical stage is to have ideally some sort of shared army at some point, and probably a relatively well maintained one. And I do think like at least this 2% goal, I'm mostly in favor of it. I mean, I might change my mind of that. That might also just be some residue of my right-leaning viewpoint before, but yeah, I do think it makes some sense. I'm not, yeah, I'm probably a bit different than like a lot of other leftists on this topic. Additionally, there was one other thing. Additionally, I think that, oh, I'm going a bit too far over there. Additionally, I think that, what do I think? I just had it. Yeah, with like climate change and things like that, there will obviously be a lot more catastrophes. Like we've seen that in Germany now, like the flooding all around the world. There's fires, there's more hurricanes and typhoons, they're more devastating, there's droughts, there's heat waves, you know, there's all sorts of events that we will have to try to work against. And in Germany it's kind of difficult to have the army to work in domestically for, well, again, historical reasons. But I do think like at least some sort of spending for the army can also be put into disaster preparedness, possibly prevention. I think it's mostly preparedness, and also like in helping afterwards with that, which could perhaps be a more peaceful usage of those funds, because obviously 2% of GDP is still a lot of money. But like I said, I'm going to agree with that. Right, I'm probably also, yeah, I mean, we'll see. Okay. At the federal elections, teenagers from the age of 16 should be allowed to vote. So I think as many people as possible should be allowed to vote, and I am very much in favor of this. I could even imagine earlier, but 16 is good. I think like 16-year-olds, they have opinions. They are they probably know more than a lot of people about what actually happens in politics, because it might be a topic of conversation in schools sometimes. It depends, but you don't have to be particularly knowledgeable about politics to vote, in my opinion. It has to, you make your decision, and I do think democracy is a very important thing. I mean, if we're in like contentious issues, I think at least people that have permanent residence in a place should be able to vote, possibly also like immigrants after a certain, who are just on a visa after a certain amount of time, certainly local elections. And I do think prisoners should be allowed to vote, which is very contentious in the United States, I think, where not just aren't prisoners allowed, like if you have a felony, you might never be allowed again to vote, which I find incredibly anti-democratic, especially with the carceral state, like a prison-focused state like the United States, which is the largest prison population in the whole world. It basically disenfranchises a huge amount of people. It's incredibly anti-democratic. So I am very much for 16-year-olds voting. Now, in terms of politics in Germany, basically, like, right-wing parties are more against it and left-wing parties more for it. Why? Younger voters lean more towards left parties. We can also see that in like the UK, where like a lot of Labour voters, or like also actually anti-Brexit voters, I think, lean more leftist, are more young than conservative voters. That might have a bunch of different reasons. One, I think, is that just the interests of people who are younger. Usually they don't have that much money. They're more, they're not as, settled. And then, like, as you get kind of a bit older, you might have more of an, well, I wouldn't say skin in the game. You have more like some part, you're allowed to, you can partake more in some of the fruits, even though this is getting a lot worse in Germany and all around the world, and so you might become a little bit more conservative. I mean, that's just one theory. There's a lot of other things to consider. Either way, I think 16-year-olds should be able to vote. Okay. Wind energy. All right. The subsidies for wind energy should be stopped. I think wind energy, and I think most experts agree, is a very important part for us to become carbon neutral. And I definitely think that the subsidies should not just continue; they should probably be extended, because right now, like, there's a lot of jobs lost in the wind energy in wind energy industry. It's actually very troubling, and then there's a lot of actually policy made against wind energy. For example, in Bavaria and some other places, you cannot create a wind you cannot create like a wind energy plant. I don't know if you want to call it like a windmill. You cannot put a windmill like under 1 kilometer next to a settlement, but you can put like a coal like plant or something like that, like somewhere. It's very populist, because wind energy has become like a very partisan issue in Germany. People are like, oh, they're really ugly, or they're really loud, they're really bad. Like, they also will use like some more green arguments that often like conservatives would not use generally, but they're like, they actually kill a lot of the wildlife. Then, as far as I can tell, experts saying like, well, that's actually, I mean, sure, they do sometimes, but it's actually relatively manageable and much less than like the alternative energies that we would be using instead of wind energy. So either way, I am for wind subsidies. Oh, wait, now I made a mistake. Can I go back? So my mistake, if you can't speak German, was that they say like wind subsidies should be ended, but I actually am for wind subsidies, so I have to not agree with this statement. All right. Okay, so this is an interesting one. This is, what is it? How do you call it? Okay, it's basically about rent control, and what they're saying is the ability of landlords to increase rent should be limited more strongly by law. That's basically what this is. So should there be rent control is the more simplistic way to view this. There is, oh man, I actually don't know what the status of it is right now, because there was like there's a lot of legal stuff around it, but Berlin was trying to do like a relatively extensive rent control, which would have been like sort of a pilot project, although like if it's not like federally or even like EU wide, there's of course limits to it, because it makes it much easier for especially big companies to decide to invest in a different city or something like that, which is a problem in the capitalist system, and when governments are uninterested in actually investing in public housing themselves, which has been the case since like the neoliberal changes, which started in Germany in the late 90s and in the US in the 80s. But yeah, Man, I'm really rambling. I'm not sure if it's easy to follow all of this, but either way, I'm not sure about rent control, to be honest. I do think like what you need is affordable housing, and rent control by itself I don't think helps. I think it's much more important to have much more new housing, especially public and affordable housing. Rent control can be one tool in that, like especially if you have like somewhere where there's a lot of outside investment for people who don't live in the houses or use them as like just as an investment, which I think is a problem in London specifically, where rents have where rents have skyrocketed, while at the same time some places are just like completely empty because they're just there for their worth, and for the worth as being, you know, sold again. The jumping between German and English is fucking me up a little bit. So sometimes rent control can be probably good to give like people more of a chance to stay in the houses they live in. Also, like in terms of what's it called? It's on the tip of my tongue. Gentrification, where like more wealthy people move into a previously kind of affordable place and basically push out the people who lived there before. And I think that is the thing that happens in Berlin a lot, where according to some experts I've heard, basically like certain parts of the city like become like kind of the popular bougie places, then people move in there, and like the people that used to live there basically have to move somewhere else, and then this new place becomes like more of a poor area, and then, you know, the hipsters again are like, oh well, this where we can live. So I mean, it's a difficult question how to do that. Okay, so like I said, I don't actually know exactly what I would say. I'm gonna stay with neutral because I don't know. I think there's other, like I said, other policies that are more important. Okay, so this is the patterns on COVID-19 vaccinations. So vaccinations against COVID-19 should continue to be protected by patents. Joe Biden a while ago actually said something against it. He was like, no, let's not do that. But Germany still very much, no, but let's keep the patents. And that is partly because Germany has an industry that has a lot of the patents. The Pfizer vaccine was actually developed by a German company, BioNTech, and there's also a lot of other pharma companies in Germany that obviously very much rely on patents, and a lot of other Western countries also rely on patents, particularly in stopping like developing countries from using their products and things like that. So I'm not a huge fan of patents, I have to say. I do think there should be like much more free information. I'm not sure that like corporations should be allowed to have patents. Like the idea behind patents, which is often like said, is that like an inventor of something should have the rights to the fruits of his or her invention. But that's obviously not what happens when like, you know, a corporation makes patents whatever they can. It just becomes sort of like an arms race in terms of patents, and I do think we need like some sort of way out of there. Maybe they have some use in some ways, but generally I'm not a big fan. I just think we should freely share what we know and how we know it, and maybe not have so much of a profit motive behind everything. So I would say I don't agree. I think the patent should be lifted. Okay, so this is another big question. This was going to take a real long time if I'm going to talk on all of these. Maybe I should cut it up. I'll see how long I'm probably doing a little bit longer. Okay, this is a big conversation in Germany because especially brown coal is still like one of the main ways that Germany was making energy, partly also because we left the nuclear energy sector after Fukushima in a very quick and not very thoughtful way that really screwed us in terms of emissions. But anyway, so in Germany we have a lot of brown coal, and we decided that was it a year ago or 2 years ago? I don't even remember. But there was basically like a big committee, and they decided that coal is going to be abandoned altogether by 2038, which for most activists is way too late. I think also most scientists are like, that's ridiculous. On the other hand, apparently coal is also becoming like kind of unprofitable, and might actually become unprofitable to such a degree that the time will be much earlier, that that coal won't be used much earlier than this 2038 would suggest. I don't know, it probably depends also if there's some sort of regulation at some point in terms of CO2 producing energies and things like that. But I guess so. So the thing is, it kind of goes in with there's basically two questions, right? Like there's all these investments in coal, and so the question is like, well, how much should they be paid for giving that up? Because all like rule of law and things like that. Even I mean, I do think like states should sometimes be a little bit strong about laws that have been influenced in very unfavorable ways for citizens and voters by corporations, which is a very common occurrence. So I don't think like just because something is in a contract, it necessarily needs to always be something that a state has to abide by, in case this agreement didn't really come from a democratic point of view, which that's more or less my point. That it comes with a bit of a problem, because like then maybe you can't trust that state anymore, then maybe investment goes away. That's kind of the arguments. But either way, so one thing is there's a lot of investment in coal, and they did it all under lawful ways. So in case they are stopped from it, they need to get like reparations, basically. They need to get how do you call it? Yeah, I mean, I guess reparations. I don't know. They will get some money from the state for the losses that they incur. And then the other thing is that there is some work in brown coal, and this labor, I think this is very similar to this like in the UK and to a degree in the United States. It's kind of like mining and labor, mining jobs are intrinsically linked with like the labor movements in Germany with the Social Democrats, and then in the UK with Labour. And so even though it's a relatively modest number of jobs, much less than we have lost in the wind in energy industry, which I was talking about earlier, where no one talks about, these kind of mining jobs are politically very charged. They're like kind of like the base, or like the philosophical base of the left movement in Germany as well. And so it's also difficult in that sense to just be like, okay, we're going to stop that, because these jobs then will be lost, and it's painful. But I am not that invested in these kind of historical leftism. I do think these people should, like the people who have the jobs, should get well paid if they lose the job, and also get chances to work in something else if it is possible. There should be a lot of subsidies for that, but I don't think we can just keep detrimental jobs forever because of some political alignment, I guess. So I am personally for the end of coal being a bit earlier than 2038, maybe 2030, maybe even earlier. I don't really know, but I have no problem with that being earlier. Besides the point that it's going to probably be expensive, because the courts will make the German government pay more money to businesses. But yeah, I agree. Okay, then we're on number question 8 of 38. I really hope that this can. 1 second, I should probably quickly check. Yeah, okay, so. Choo. Okay, just had to check whether the microphone is working, because that would be annoying, because I've been talking for hours and hours, actually probably more like 30 minutes. Okay, here's the question. Okay, so this is about how do you okay, translate this. It's about the government pension system, and the question is, should all workers be insured in a government pension system? So it's like universal government pension, basically. Which right now there's ways that you can opt out of it, especially if you are over a certain amount, or I think if you're a freelancer, or if you have a company. I think that's some of the ways that you can opt out. For a lot of other people, it is mandatory. So the question is like, if people can't opt out, there might be a lot more people. There will be a lot more people paying in. There will be also more wealthy people in, because the people who opt out are usually wealthy people who can afford it to have like pensions in some other way, or have investments. Or it's sometimes also like people who shouldn't opt out, but like, might be thinking, well, I can't afford it right now, and I'll figure something out later, or they don't think about it, and that's a problem too. So yeah, I mean, I think generally, like, if these kind of programs are universal, they have more buy-in. It's the same as with Medicare for all, things like that. I'm a fan of that. I do think you can still then have an option to invest in some sort of private insurance as well. But I think generally it's a good idea to have everyone pay in together into all sorts of like kind of social insurances. So I'm for that, really. I guess the arguments against it is like the kind of freedom, and like, oh, this not actually, you might not actually get anything, and like the government never takes care of your money well. But I think it's not a bad idea. Okay, so the right of refugees to have their family come to Germany shall be abolished. That's the thesis. That is, of course, like more of a right-wing thesis, particularly the relatively new right party in Germany, the AfD, would be very much in favor of something like this. But you can also find that some of those opinions, I would assume, in the Conservative Party, possibly in the Liberal Democrats. I don't really know about that, but generally this is sort of a left-right kind of thing again. Yeah, I'm totally against this. I think the families should be allowed to go. I think we should also take more refugees, and I think we should also take political refugees, not just or like economic refugees, not just political refugees, because economic refugees are in a way also political refugees. So I think we should just give people the chances to come here if they need it, if they're in danger in some ways. We should definitely not send people back to Afghanistan, which we literally did like a week before the end of the US occupation of Afghanistan. Which, I mean, that's just insane. Like, everyone knew the Taliban would take over. They knew this for years. Anyone who's read like any sort of mainstream, well, I mean, the mainstream media was kind of quiet on Afghanistan, but like if you were informed, you knew at least like 6 months ago that like, okay, yeah, so this is happening. The Taliban are basically shortly from taking over. Even before that, like, there were negotiations between the United States and the Taliban. I mean, I guess they were kind of clandestine, but okay, that's a bit of besides the point. Anyways, I think refugees should be allowed to come, and they definitely should be allowed to bring their families if they are here and if they are accepted here. I think it is good for them, it's good for society if their families can come, if they can like build a life here, if they can actually start working, then they will also like contribute to the society if you give them the chance to do that. And right now there's often a problem that refugees are just not allowed to work. And then like the right wing is like, well, none of these people are working. It's like, well, yeah, but they're not allowed to work, so that's a bit of a problem. Or like alternatively, like you can see in this question again, like the AfD will also often talk about how, well, it's only young men who are coming here. Why is it only young men? Where are all the other people? And it's like, well, it's true that like overwhelming the refugees, especially in the 2015, were like younger men who made this trek. Often are probably also the ones most in danger from like wars when being drafted and things like that. I'm not saying that like other family members are not in danger as well, but I do think the more direct murderous aspects of, or like having to murder aspects is usually focused on more younger people, and they might be in the best position to actually make this track, and in a way then often the hopes of the families are pinned on this person to get to Europe or to get to a specific country, often a country where maybe they have family, maybe where they have ties, maybe where they think they have the best chance to become a part of the society. So that's another problem in Europe, right? Because Europe often had the rule that only where the refugee first arrived, that's where they should be staying, which is like very convenient for Germany because literally no refugees arrive in Germany. No, literally none, because we are surrounded by other EU countries and Switzerland, and no one comes from the North Sea. Like, you know, if they're there, they will first go to like. I mean, how would that even happen, right? Like, so basically they have to go through the Mediterranean Sea, right? Where they could go to Greece, they could go to Italy, they could go to France, then they could go to Spain, and they could go up again and go to France again, then go to the UK, which also doesn't get very many refugees, and then they would have to come to Germany. That's basically the only way it could happen, which doesn't happen. So for Germany, it would have been and has been very easy in the past to just say like, yeah, we're not taking refugees, none of them come here, no one gets asylum unless they arrive here and can show that they're not, they haven't passed any other EU country where they would have first had to take asylum, which again doesn't happen because like if you're at the border from Austria and you're like, hey, I would like asylum, you're like, well, you're in Austria, you know. Okay, okay, that was another aside. Well, it's actually fun. Like, I can really put like a bunch of my thoughts down. I'm really like really revealing my power level too. Like, I don't usually talk that openly about all of my thoughts. But yes. Okay. So anyway, so the right wing parties, they will say like, oh, it was only young men that came. I just gave the reasons why it's a lot of men. What's the solution for that? Get the family to come, get their wives to come, get their sisters and mothers to come. Suddenly it's not just young men. Get their fathers to come, get their grandfathers to come. You know, they have a chance to build a life here in a safer situation. Maybe come back if then go back to their countries when they have the chance. Like a lot of these people do want to go back. Like, you know, I mean, most people don't really want to leave their homes, you know, like people like me are very privileged and wealthy are an exception because we can like kind of choose. Like, you know, I can live in like a nice life in Japan, or I could live a nice life in the United States as I did before, or in the UK. So it's easy for me to choose to leave my place, and I can always come back to my home. I can visit my family. Not lately for some pandemic reasons. But it's a very different situation than an actual refugee who, like, you know, might actually like to live in their neighborhood. People usually don't want to move. That's like far away from their families, far away from their their communities, things like that. There actually has to be some pretty deep reasons to do it, which in the US is often economic, because people just don't have jobs, or it's gang related, or and obviously in the refugee crisis it's a lot of the wars, and in the future it's probably going to be a lot of what they call climate refugees, you know, like environmental change refugees, because there might be droughts, there might be no food, and obviously then wars start over these kind of resources again. And I do think that the wealthy countries which have benefited from in a lot of ways abusing and using these other countries do have some moral duties to help the people both in their own country. Like I do agree with like right-wingers when they say we should help them in their country so they can live their good life. So like, I agree, we probably shouldn't start wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. That would be a good start for sure. And we should, like, you know, give money to camps there, to give them a chance to live their lives there. But like, it should still be humane, right? Like, you know, it shouldn't basically be like concentration camps where they live for generations and generations. If that's the alternative, then like I do think we have a duty to also open our society to some degree. Okay, then like they will talk about like, well, but how many, you know, like at some point it will collapse our system, and like that is of course like true in some sense. Like Germany can't take 500 million refugees, but like the point is not necessarily reached at a 1 million, especially in a aging society like Germany. So it should not be abolished. Number 10. So I think I'll have to... Sorry, the camera only records for 20 minutes. My towel. Had a shower earlier. Okay. On the revenues of digital services in Germany, there should be a national tax. I don't really have an opinion on that one. I don't know if that's... I would have to think more about it. I mean, I guess like the idea is that like a lot of services like are given from other countries, and then like often like from like more tax haveny countries, or like from EU countries that give like really nice tax breaks, and so like that Amazon and Google and Apple basically don't pay taxes in the EU. So it does make some sense in that sense. I don't know if it's the best way to do that. Might have some negative consequences. I do think these companies should pay a fair amount of taxes in the countries where they make money. And so, I mean, this might be an aspect of it, but I would have to look into it much more. And it might also be... there might also be other ways that might be better to actually do that. The question with taxes is always like, what does it lead to? Like, what does the tax cause, right? Because taxes basically also change behavior in some way and like disincentivize some things. And I don't know if it's good or bad in this sense. It sounds like, to me it sounds good, but I don't know much about it, so I'm going to put neutral because I don't know that much about it. Okay, this question is the traditional family of... It doesn't say this was me, because when I hear traditional family, that's what I do. Traditional family. The traditional family of father, mother, and children should be supported or subsidized stronger or more than other family relationships, or living arrangements, I guess is what they say. I'm against that. I don't think the traditional family should be subsidized more. I think it's already socially very much advantaged, and I do think if anything should be helped more, it's single parent household, particularly single mother households, which are the most likely to be in really dire straits, to be in extreme poverty, which already adds insult to injury. Like a lot of those children, so they don't have a father or a mother. Well, if it's a single mother household, well, so that's heteronormative. But either way, so they only have one parent / caretaker, while most children do have two, which is kind of like, you know, it doesn't have to be super sad for them, you know. Maybe it's nice, but like it's probably also nice to have two caretakers, right? Like, you know, you can spend time with them, they have different opinions, you can play them out against each other. And then on the other hand, it's also very hard for the single caretaker to take care of their children. And then on top of that, they're also financially in really bad situation. And so people are often talking about like, well, they should be like in a family. It's like, but that doesn't work, right? Like if you're in an abusive relationship or whatever like that, like it's still better to be like a single. It's way better to be in a single mother than be in an abusive relationship with someone, right? Like that's just clear. Also for the children, and so if there's no one there, or like, you know, if one of the parents died or something like that, like these people need more support from the community. Like children have a right from the community to be raised right, I think. And so I definitely don't think we should like further subsidize the already winners of this society, which is not to say like there's anything wrong with what they call a traditional family. That's a perfectly fine arrangement. That's what my family was. I mean, we don't have children, but that's my arrangement with my girlfriend, and that's all fine. But I don't think we should get advantages over like everyone else. In fact, I mean, I am taking. So this is like, I don't think this is hypocritical, but some people might think this is hypocritical. But I am taking advantage tax-wise of some of these tax breaks that relationships have, which in the past were not accessible to homosexual partnerships, for example. I mean, I'd have to think about it, but I don't think it's necessarily. I just think the rules should be better, right? Like we shouldn't be advantaged, but that doesn't mean that like I should now pay way more because the rules are stupid. I don't know. That's just what I think. Either way, I think like, let's not privilege the people that are already doing so well way more. That's just a weird kind of point of view. And so maybe I should say one more thing. Like one of the aspects is like what they will say often is like, because they can get children and we should like subsidize children, which we actually do with the direct money for children in Germany. So that's already a thing. But I do think like we also have a lot of children that aren't in very good situations, or that are in the foster system, or that are orphans and generally things like that. And I do think like if you take care, if you adopt like a child, you should have all the same. You should be treated all the same, and it should be seen as exactly the same, even if it's like single adoptions, or if it's homosexual adoptions, or also if it's poly adoptions, things like that. I don't discriminate in that sense, and I don't think my government should. So I don't agree that it should be specially subsidized. Okay, donations from companies to parties should continue to be supported. That is more of a problem. I mean, it's also a problem in Germany, but it's definitely a problem in the United States, and particularly like these PACs, right? What is it called? Political action committees, or super PACs, even, where you can just spend limitless amounts of money on politics. That's just very, very toxic situation. That's not, I think, the situation in Germany. There are like some limits of what you can do, and that's good. should companies generally be excluded? I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess, like, I mean, why should companies be able to donate to parties? That doesn't seem right to me. Like, I think people should be allowed to donate, and then too, probably within limits, and certainly within, like, disclosure limits. There have been a lot of scandals in Germany lately. For example, our health minister went to a private party with a lot of wealthy donors who all donated 9,999 euros. Huh, interesting number. Why do you think that is? Because if it was 10,000, they would have had to declare them. So that's a bit awkward. That doesn't seem very right, because, like, I mean, even if he's the most honest and greatest person ever, like, obviously he is influenced by who he eats dinner with, who gets his ear. I don't talk to the health minister much. I also don't have 9,999 euros lying around to just talk to him if I wanted to, and he probably wouldn't listen to me because I'm way too leftist for him. But so I do see, like, there's a bit of a problem there, even if, like, no one there intends, like, anything bad. Like, there's a huge conflict of interest, in my opinion, that should not be allowed to that degree. It's a difficult tightrope walk, because obviously, like, politicians should be allowed to go to dinner with people, you know, but they should probably, like, they're already, like, or with, like, mostly with wealthy people, they don't really hear or speak with, like, you know, the broad masses who don't have that much money and influence. So there's already, like, a lot of bias in that direction. And then on top of that, like, you know, if you can buy access, while that is very, you know, for you that, like, if you're a company owner and you're like, well, I really want to talk to that health minister, like, we have this perfect new thing that could save hundreds of lives or whatever. It's like, you know, and obviously you rationalize it, but at the same time, you know, it's like, well, there's also other people that should probably also have access to the health minister. So I don't know. It's a difficult situation. I think probably companies shouldn't have the right to donate, and individuals should be limited. Additionally, there's another thing that the leftist party, particularly the Social Democrats, they have, like, a pretty big publishing empire for historical reasons, so that's often cited as also a conflict of interest, which, yeah, I mean, you could also see that I can imagine to, like, put that in some way and, like, kind of separate that in sort of like a monopoly power thing. But yeah, so anyways, I don't think it should be supported, I guess. I don't have a very strong opinion on it, though. Next one. Students. Okay, so maybe I should say, like, what it says here, BAföG, that is subsidy for students, particularly, well, I think it's only for students who don't have enough money so they can study. And it is, so I didn't need this because I'm from a privileged background. My family really supported me in my university degree, which I dropped out of, you know, probably bringing shame to the family. But other people do rely on that money. They need it. I think my mom got subsidies when she went. As well, I don't know if it was called BAföG back then, or if it was something else. I don't know. So okay, so that's anyway. So that's the subsidies for students. And now the question is, like, should students get these subsidies independently of the income of their parents? All right. So one thing is, like a lot of, I think all of the money, I'm not sure if it's all of the money or some money doesn't have to be paid back and some money has to be paid back, but definitely some of that money needs to be paid back. But I think it's not like messed up as student loan debt in the US, where, like, it's the same thing. It's where it's like this insane huge amount of money, and you can never shed it. You can never. I don't know enough about, I guess, the German system in that sense. But okay, so the question is, so the first thing is, like, well, first thing is, like, well, if the parents are wealthy, they should just pay for it, right? Obviously. But that might not be possible for everyone. It might be difficult, right? So I think in Germany you do have the right to be supported as a child, but you might have to then basically sue your parents if they have the money to give you that money, which can be obviously a very difficult situation to do. So I think personally, the subsidy should probably just be open to anyone who wants it and needs it, and they can decide by themselves. And a lot of, especially if you have to pay part of it back, you'd be like, well, I don't need it. I don't want it. I get my support from something else. Or you take it and start your life then, and then you pay it back. I think it makes sense. Always is a kind of a limited thing because not everyone goes to university. And also it's not because university is expensive. It's about like living situation, right? Like, you need rent, you need to eat, things like that. So that's much more what it is for. You need to maybe buy like notebooks and things like that. As you see, I'm not that much in that material, in that topic, so I don't know that much about it. But I think it should be independent of the parents, because there can be a lot of situations with parents, and maybe if the parents are wealthy enough, like the government can then say like, you have to pay for your child. Like we paid them the subsidy, but like that's actually your duty, and you like it's your dereliction of duty. So give us money. I think that was a reasonable way to do that, rather than putting an onus on the children who can maybe not easily do that. So question 14, I think this is going to be the last question for now. Then I'm going to maybe cut this and make a two-part out of it. I don't know, there's a lot of time already. So the question is, in Germany, it should generally be possible, besides the German, a second nationality. I think that should be possible. I think that should be possible anywhere. I think basically take whatever nationality you can get. Germany is a country that doesn't allow that. Japan, as far as I know, is also one that doesn't allow it. I know people kind of skirt this by just not telling. The authorities that they have two nationalities, which I think is praxis, is very good. But because so basically I think if you are like, for one thing where it's obviously very often, and that I think they might actually have an exemption in Germany, is like, Turkish immigrants to Germany who then have like, the German and the Turkish passport. And so like a lot of people say like, oh, then you have double allegiance. That's kind of fucked up, to be honest, to talk about that way. But I think like, if you are basically like, you have ties to both of these nationalities, like you should have their passports, and they should like see you as like what their citizens. Of course that can lead to some problems, but that's, I think, something that states should solve, and not necessarily the person who actually is like culturally in both, invested in both of these cultures. So I think it should be generally possible. Okay, so I think that's my... by the way, I only have one nationality, and that's fine. But for example, in England, like a lot of Irish people, and like in the UK and Ireland, there's a lot of people who have dual passports, and that's possible and works there as well. So I mean, it clearly can work. So no reason to not have it work, I guess. That's where I... Yeah, that's where I stop for now. Question 15. It's, goodness gracious, there's going to be a lot more to record. I didn't realize how long this would take, but I mean, I have a lot of opinions on this, I guess. I don't know if this is even interesting, right? Like, I mean, to me, I'm kind of like stammering. I'll put on my head one more time. I'm kind of stammering through like my thoughts, but it helps me collect the thoughts, and maybe it gives you like a kind of a view into what is being discussed in Germany for the election that's coming up. Also, generally, a lot of these things are not just relevant to the election right now. They're always relevant in Germany until they get solved in one way or another, and then maybe they become contentious in the other direction. And it also maybe gives you a bit of a view into how I think about politics. I do think like a lot of things have like multiple views that are acceptable. I don't really think like all of these things are like red lines. If you don't believe what I believe, you're like a bad person or something like that. Not necessarily. I think there's some things that are that, but I wouldn't say that that's generally the case. I'm just trying to explain why I think the way I think, and so I'm probably going to do this in 2 or maybe 3 parts as it looks right now. We'll see how long it takes. So see you later in the next one.